and welcome to today's webinar, The Dark Web, Protecting Your Company's Digital Identity. My name is Emily Venable, and I am the Solutions Manager here at OnPar Technologies, and I will be your host for today's event. To begin, let me go over just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded for quality and reproduction purposes, so all attendees will be on mute throughout the recorded portion of the webinar. You can ask any questions you have throughout the webinar by using the chat feature on this meeting by clicking on the comments icon at the bottom left of your screen. And my colleagues will be available to answer any questions you might have. That includes our Director of Business Development, Donna Hall, and our CTO, Scott Stafford. There will be a larger question and answer session at the end of the webinar, and at the end of this you will also be able to request a live search of your company's credentials. So keep in mind when we do this, all passwords will be blocked so no one in the webinar can see them in their entirety, and we will do this after the recording is over so we can protect your privacy and security. The information in this webinar and the statistics that you see today have all been collected from the Department of Homeland Security's cybersecurity site and the National Cybersecurity Center, as well as a website called Krebs on Security. This is one of my favorite security sites. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a great place to follow news and alerts on cybersecurity threats, data breaches, and other security news. So I know that my colleague Emily Warnke is putting a link to that in the chat box, and it's just a great place if you want to follow the world of cybersecurity. And last but not least, all attendees today, you guys will be receiving a free dark web scan or report that will email to you in the next couple of days. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's start talking about what the dark web actually is. So the dark web is part of the internet, and there are essentially three parts to the internet. The first part is the surface web, and the surface web is what you're probably most familiar with. You can access the surface web by going to any search engine web browser like Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever your given search engine of choice is, and you can search for sites, or you can type a site directly into the URL bar at the top of your screen. This is the internet that the average person uses, and from what we have discovered, it's actually a relatively small portion of the entire internet. The next level is the deep web. That's also known as the invisible web, and that is all the content that is not indexed by a search engine or web browser. It's basically all the things that you cannot Google. So the deep web is actually estimated to be 500 times larger than the surface web. And the deep web contains things like government and corporate databases, or maybe your company runs a CRM system or a financial system that you access online, like maybe QBO, and you're given that URL link to log into your company's system. That's not something that you can Google. And you can also access the deep web from the surface web. So for example, maybe you have gone to your favorite travel site like Travelocity or Expedia, and you're planning your summer vacation. So you put in your destination and you put in the dates of travel, and when you click search, those results are actually pulling from the deep web. It's not something you could have Googled, and it's not a website you would have known the URL to type into the bar. So also keep in mind that the deep web is there to keep your personal information private. So you wouldn't want somebody to go to Google and be able to type your name in and be able to figure out which bank you're a member of or what's on your Amazon wish list. So the deep web stores this information and keeps it out of the reach of search engine results. Now, the last part of the web is what we're here to talk about today, and that is the dark web. And this is actually a tiny fraction of the web, and it's only accessible through specialized software or specific authorizations. It's basically hidden from the average user. Users of the dark web access it mostly using something called a Tor router. That actually stands for the Onion router, and you can tell if it's a dark web site if it ends in the domain .onion. And Tor networks are specifically there to provide anonymous access to the internet. The identities and the locations of these dark web users stay anonymous and can't be tracked due to the encryption system that is used. The dark web encryption technology basically routes the user's data through so many servers that the identity of the user is completely anonymous. So if you learn one thing today, the word anonymous is associated with the dark web. So that kind of leads us into who uses the dark web. And as you may have guessed from the word anonymous, a majority of the dark web users are involved in criminal activity. So dark web users have been linked to crimes such as child pornography, human trafficking, the sale of drugs, firearms, and stolen credit cards. The most famous case about the dark web came in 2013. Some of you guys might remember this. It was a dark web marketplace called Silk Road, and it was really the first modern online black market where you could pretty much purchase anything that you could imagine. And it was in business for just over 2 years, and it was shut down by the FBI, and its founder is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And last June, they found another dark web marketplace. This one was called Alpha Bay, and Alpha Bay was estimated to have made between $600,000 and $800,000 per day in online criminal sales. So that, again, was found by the FBI and shut down. Now, keep in mind, too, that the dark web isn't necessarily just used by criminals. Not everything on the dark web is illegal. Some users use the dark web to participate in activities like whistleblowing or alerting to illegal activity either in politics or within corporations. And then there's countries that don't allow access to things like social media, like Facebook and things like that. So users use the dark web to get around their country's censorship. So, like I said, not everything on here is illegal, but it is estimated that around 46% of the users of the dark web are involved in criminal activity. And I want to just bring your attention to a term I'm going to be using throughout the rest of this. It's called threat actor. So the term threat actor is given to an entity that is responsible for an incident that impacts or has the potential to impact an organization's security. So you're going to hear me use the word threat actor throughout this presentation. So some threat actors actually execute the cyber attacks themselves, while some threat actors are just middlemen who create or sell software needed to execute an attack. And yes, you did hear me right. You can purchase software along with instructions on the dark web to perform a cyber attack. They have made this super easy. It's kind of like cyber attacks for dummies. You can go on there and buy the software and read the instructions, and boom, you're now a threat actor. And it really has become that easy. These threat actors really have one motivation, and that's return on investment. They're doing this to make money, and cyber attacks have really become big business in the past decade. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a cyber attack? So a cyber attack can come in many forms. This slide shows just a few examples of cyber attacks that could happen to your organization. And just a forewarning, some of the information I'm about to tell you guys is technical in nature, so hang in there with me while I tell you about these attacks. So the first and one of the most popular current attacks is called phishing. And this is an attack that is used to steal user data, including login credentials. The phishing occurs when an attacker disguises themselves as a trusted entity and tricks a user into opening an email, an instant message, or a text message. So the recipient is prompted to click on a malicious link inside of an email or a text message or instant message, and that can lead to the installation of malware, the freezing of a system as part of a ransomware attack, or it can reveal sensitive information. Phishing is really used to get a foothold inside of a corporation or governmental network, and they use it as part of a larger attack. So they compromise one employee in order to bypass all of your company's security parameters and to be able to distribute malware inside of your closed environment or gain access to secure data. And email phishing, it's really a numbers game. These attackers send out thousands of fraudulent messages just to hope that a few people click on these things. So this can result in a ton of information and a ton of money that they can get, even if a small percentage of the recipients fall for the scam. So these emails, just to let you know, they come from someone or something that you trust. Many of them involve things that you're used to using, like Amazon or PayPal or other trusted and high usage sites. When you see these emails, they contain the real company's logo or have other icons that make you feel like it's real. But if you look closely at them, the sender might not have the correct domain at the end of their email. For example, if it's coming from Amazon, it might say it's coming from amazonservicing.com, or Amazon might be misspelled. Also, if you open the email and you hover over the link that they want you to click, and remember, hover, don't click on it, just hover over it, it will reveal the URL that you would be clicking on, and most of the time that is not a legit site. It's not taking you to Amazon or PayPal. It's taking you somewhere completely different, and this is probably a website set up by the threat actor with real logos and things to make you feel safe and ask you to give them information. Now, more recently, there have become these new attacks, and they're called spear phishing. And spear phishing is just like phishing, but it targets a specific person. So most likely it's going to target somebody high up in an organization, like a CEO. But they can also use the CEO's information to target a lower level employee. So maybe you get an email from your boss or your manager and it really is coming from the correct email address. They could have spoofed or copied your manager's email address, and they might send you an email and ask you for something like W-2s, payroll information, or even to do something like make a wire transfer. And it looks like it's a real email. It looks like it's coming from your boss. If they have penetrated your identity, they might even go as far. I've seen some in some of these presentations I've been watching where they go into your Facebook and they find out that you went on vacation, and your manager then sends you an email like, hey, hope you enjoyed your vacation. The pictures you posted on Facebook were great. And, it makes you feel like they're really your boss and they're asking you to give them some information. So if you ever come across something that just seems a little fishy, you probably want to verify that verbally with the person that's requesting you to send that proprietary information. It's actually estimated that 95% of network attacks are the result of a successful spear phishing attack. Now to move on to the next one is called malvertising. That is simply an acronym for malicious advertising. This is the use of online malicious advertisements to spread malware and compromise systems. So this generally occurs when they have injected some sort of unwanted or malicious code into an advertisement. So these threat actors, they pay legitimate online advertisers to basically host their infected ad on pretty popular websites. Generally, these legitimate advertising networks don't even know that they're hosting malicious content. And there's been numerous examples of this in the news. Certain popular websites like the New York Times, the BBC, AOL, and the NFL have all been targets of malvertising campaigns. So you're on, let's say, for example, the New York Times website, and you see an ad for something you want to buy, and you click on it, and that code in the background immediately infects your system with malware. So these are very, very hard to spot, and chances are you will never know you were infected this way. Now, the third type of attack is called a watering hole. So a watering hole, instead of infecting just an ad, it infects an entire site. So it's used as a security exploit to compromise a group of users. So the goal is to infect a user's computer, once again, gain access to the network at the target's place of employment. So these tend to focus on legitimate, popular websites. They are a derivative of what's called a pivot attack, which targets one thing to get to another thing. So the first thing that happens in a watering hole attack is they target they figure out who their targets are. Usually those are first-line workers, and they determine what websites they visit often. And then they target that website they visit often with malicious code. And while watering hole attacks are uncommon, they pose a considerable threat because they're difficult to detect, and they usually target high security organizations through their low risk employees. So they try to get in using your first line workers. The last one I'm going to talk about on here is just a simple web attack. This is known as vulnerability scanning in some circles. It basically scans your website for vulnerabilities in your system. So any company that has a web presence faces this threat on a daily basis. And you can have a well-prepared and executed security plan to try to prevent these attacks, but these people are sophisticated and they are developing new attacks on a daily basis. These vulnerability scans are usually a hacker's first time. These little hackers are called script kiddies, which I think is a funny name, but those are basically attackers that have little to no hacking experience, and they use a vulnerability scan of your network or of your website to figure out a way in. So, as I said earlier, these are just a few types of web attacks. New ones are coming out every day. That's why I told you about that Krebs on security site. They like to alert you to new ways people are trying to get into your network. For example, ransomware, which everybody kind of knows these days. You might know it better as CryptoLocker. That was kind of unimaginable just 5 years ago, that somebody would be able to get into your network and freeze and hold your files for ransom. And now it's an everyday occurrence. Actually, CryptoLocker kind of went away for a little bit, and recently, probably in the past couple of months, it's come back. There's a whole new iteration of CryptoLocker out there these days. So now that you know the ways that they try to steal your information, let's look at what they do with the information they obtain. And pardon me, but this might be a little blurry. But before we get into the information, I just want to point out a couple of statistics. 28,500 is the average number of data records per company that are compromised when a network is breached. And when that network is breached and those credentials are compromised, those credentials can sell for as little as $1 on black web marketplaces. Who would have thought that your email and your password would be worth so little, right? So now let's look and see what they do with these purchased credentials. So they've gone on the web, they've paid $1, they've got your username and password. What are they going to do with it? First and foremost, they can send spam from your email account, and that can cause you to be blacklisted by companies that you do legitimate business with. Nothing is worse than your email account being blacklisted, and it's hard to fix. The next thing, they can deface your website or host malicious content, like those watering holes and those malvertisements we were talking about. They can get into your website and host those on your site. Number 3, the most common, they can install malware and ransomware on your network. Next, they can use those credentials that they have purchased to compromise other accounts that you use, because they are counting on the fact that you used the same, if not a very similar password to access multiple different sites that you use in your business. They can also steal sensitive and proprietary corporate data, And lastly, they can steal your personal identity. And just to give you a little personal story, my Social Security number was breached 2 years ago. A threat actor was able to log on to a popular tax website and file taxes under my name. And luckily, I'm a pretty proactive person. I file my taxes really early. I file in February. And I was able to find out that my taxes had already been filed and alert the IRS and alert the Social Security Administration, and they were actually able to stop that check from being cut, which it was a pretty large amount, being sent to that person who stole my credit card number and filed my taxes. And while I might be joking about it now and using it for fodder, it was really not fun. I mean, it took me hours and hours on the phone with the IRS and with the Social Security Administration to straighten the whole thing out, and it was painful. And I'm probably going to be dealing with it for about the next 5 years because I will have to use a identity theft ID to file my taxes for the next 5 years. So I know many of you probably have very similar stories, whether it was a credit card that got hacked and purchases made in your name, or maybe your taxes have been filed by somebody. But this is very common, but it's becoming so much more common in corporations now as a way to get into your corporate network. So as you probably figured out from my subtle hints throughout this presentation, cybercrime is on the rise. It has become a huge business, and it's making these threat actors lots of money with minimal work. If you've ever heard the phrase, work smarter, not harder, these guys really are looking to do the least effort to get the most return on their investments. And to be honest, most companies have already been breached and don't even know it. You might have information that's been breached, like your personal Social Security number or credit card, but businesses also have been breached, and it's hard to know if you've been breached. It's actually true that these attacks are more common for small to medium-sized businesses because they lack the security that large corporations can afford. So in this next slide, just you can look at these statistics, but according to the FTC, information available for sale on the dark web is up to 20 times more likely to come from an entity whose breach was not reported to the media, and many of these are small businesses, restaurant chains, medical practices, law firms, even school districts. In fact, most of the security breaches that the Secret Service investigates involve small businesses. And just to give you a little story, while I was preparing this webinar, I came across this one story about a company called Efficient Escrow, and they're out of California. They were actually forced to close their doors and lay off their entire staff because of a cyber attack. It resulted in a $1.5 million loss. Basically, a threat actor gained access to their company's bank information because of malware. And they broke into their network, and first thing they did was wire $400,000 from the company's bank into an account in Moscow. And then, once they were successful with that one, they did 2 more transfers of over $1 million this time to a bank in China. And the company was able to recover that first transfer, but not the last 2. And actually last year on PAR we hosted a security summit, and we actually had an FBI special agent come out, and he told us that with these cyber crimes, once the money that they have stolen leaves the borders of the United States and goes into a foreign bank, the chances of getting that money back are slim to none. These countries don't cooperate with us. They don't really care that the money has ended up in their country, and so the chances of getting the money back is extremely difficult. And so back to Efficient Escrow, they lost over $1 million in one fiscal year and didn't have any way to recover the funds, and it actually led to state regulators shutting their business down just 3 days after they reported the loss. And the result to this company was that the 2 owners, which were brothers, and their 9-person staff were out of jobs, and then they faced losing even more money in attorney's fees because they were sued by their customers whose money was taken out of those escrow accounts, and they lost their money. So I know that this is just one story of a business that suffered a cyber attack, and there's tons of stories you're never going to hear. To be honest, I researched this for a long time. It is hard to find a story of a small business because most of these business owners don't want to let the public know that they were victims of a cyber attack. Now, a recent study, which was conducted by Nationwide Insurance, actually surveyed over 1,000 small business owners, and they found that more than 3/4 of the business owners thought cyber attacks were unlikely to affect their business, and that 41% of them believed that attacks were more common in large businesses. And as from what I've just told you, you know that's a really risky outlook because the study found that 50% of small businesses had actually been a victim of a cyber attack. Meanwhile, only 13% of the business owners admitted to being a victim of the attack. So overall, a successful cyber attack can cause major damage to your business, and it can affect your bottom line as well as your business's standing and consumer trust. So these can really be broken down into 3 types of categories as to what the impact of a security breach will be. That is financial, reputational, and legal. As far as the financial goes, of course, you're going to lose money because of theft of corporate information, theft of financial information, theft of money itself. There could be a disruption in trade, and you could lose businesses or contracts because of it. Now, as far as the reputational goes, trust is basically the most essential element that you have with a customer. And cyber attacks can truly destroy the trust that your customers have in you. So that can lead to, once again, loss of customers, loss of sales, and a reduction in profits. And then lastly, the legal implications of a cyber attack. Like I told you with the Efficient Escrow Company lawsuits, you almost have a certainty of being sued if you have a data breach. But also remember that there are data protection and privacy laws that require you to manage the security of all the personal data that you hold, whether that's your staff's information or your customer's information. And if this data is accidentally or deliberately compromised and you failed to deploy the appropriate security measures, you can face fines and you can face regulatory sanctions, especially if you're in the healthcare industry or anybody that has compliance requirements. So now that we know what the dark web is and who uses it and what cyber attacks are, let's look at how these compromises occur in the first place. So a majority of attacks can be prevented with little proactivity and some education. Obviously, with the watering holes and the malvertising, sometimes that just occurs by clicking on a wrong link. But let's first talk about passwords. So in the words of a wise person I once spoke to, passwords are a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. But unfortunately, usernames and passwords are the most common digital credentials used today, and they're all that stands between your employees and all those online services that they need. Corporate network, social media sites, e-commerce sites, all these other online services that you use in your company. And in this way, passwords are really the front line of corporate security. And of course, a good security practice is to completely use a different password for every service. But the fact is, over 80% of Americans replicate the same or very similar passwords for each service they use. And this just makes it easier for cyber criminals to breach multiple services once they've gotten their hands on one password. I mean, these threat actors are truly just hoping that you use the same password at work as you do for your bank account. And if that happens, they've hit the jackpot, and they can, hurt you personally and your business as well. Another vulnerability that a lot of people don't think about is free public Wi-Fi. And it's so widely available these days. Public Wi-Fi, as you know, is at restaurants and coffee shops and libraries and hotel rooms and airports. And, you name it, public Wi-Fi access is there. And of course, we all know that jumping on a free internet connection is super convenient. You can, sit at a coffee shop or an airport and, access your online accounts, catch up on work, check your emails. But you really shouldn't forget the security risks that come with free Wi-Fi, because free Wi-Fi isn't as secure as you might think. Just because you need a password to log into it doesn't mean that the activities you're doing online are encrypted. So a weak security protocol can make Wi-Fi networks easy to hack, and just there's so many ways that a threat actor can get into those networks and find your information. Then there's this other problem with public Wi-Fi, and that is the risk of joining a rogue Wi-Fi hotspot. So a rogue Wi-Fi hotspot happens when a threat actor basically sets up a fake Wi-Fi hotspot. They can do that by using their cell phone hotspot. And so maybe you're sitting in the lobby of a hotel and you go to log on to Wi-Fi and you see a network that's called Hotel Guest, or maybe it's even more sophisticated and it says Marriott Courtyard Guest, and you click on it and you get on the internet. Well, that might not be the hotel's true guest network, but a network set up by a threat actor who is in or nearby that lobby and set up that cell phone hotspot and made a Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, what they can do is what's called a man-in-the-middle attack, and that means that they can intercept the communication between you and the websites that you're visiting, allowing them to read or insert anything of their choosing. So the criminal can watch everything you do. They can get your passwords, they can see your Facebook page, they can watch you check your company email, figure out who your boss is, or put malware directly on your computer. So free Wi-Fi is kind of, I would say, one of the things most people don't think about when it comes to accessing their data, especially their corporate data. That really should never be done on a public Wi-Fi spot. So now that you've been properly informed, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, you're probably wondering what you can do to protect your company from these sorts of things. So first things first, enable password complexity for your organization. Make your passwords longer. Make them require characters. My coworker, I think, has put a link to a great password analyzer into the chat. You can use that and see how difficult it is and how long it would take to crack your current password. Second, one of the best things that you can do is enable multi-factor authentication. Most of you guys have probably had to use this if you do any sort of online banking, and that's where you receive a text or a call or an email and it gives you a code, and you have to put the code in before it'll log you into your system. Just to let you know, most Office 365 licenses come with this capability, and we would be happy to help you enable this. We have very, very easy to follow instructions and have enabled this recently for a lot of companies. Next is to use a managed software for spam control, anti-malware, and antivirus protection. You want to make sure your computers are constantly patched, they're constantly updated, and that there is an anti-malware and antivirus system running on that machine to stop attacks before they happen. Fourth, our suggestion is to turn on anti-phishing protocols. So just to let you know, Office 365 now has this little add-on that you can get called Advanced Threat Protection. And what that does, it's pretty cool. It takes all the inbound email coming into your system, and it takes attachments or embedded links inside of emails, and it strips those out and it runs them for malware. So that basically ensures that any email that makes it into your inbox has been scanned and there is no malware attached to attachments or to embedded links. But even cooler is that the Advanced Threat Protection package now includes 20 anti-phishing licenses. So you can actually turn on anti-phishing protocols for up to 20 people in your organization. Usually you want to do that for like the higher level people in the organization. You can even do third-party emails, like if you have board members that don't have your same domain, you can turn on anti-phishing for them as well. And then one thing I didn't put on here is encryption, email encryption. If you're going to send proprietary data, I don't care if it's credit card information, usernames, passwords, addresses, phone numbers, you want to start sending those emails encrypted. That right there is going to prevent a lot of headache, and a lot of information can be stolen if you're not doing it through an encrypted email. And then the last thing I have listed on here is educate your employees. You know, most people don't think about these things. They might know about them, but they might not think about them when they're going about their day-to-day job. And, you know, let them know, be aware of suspicious emails with unknown links. Let them know what malvertising is. Let them know that they shouldn't use free Wi-Fi to connect to their company email. Create a cybersecurity document for your company, or better yet, have yearly cybersecurity seminars for your employees, and make sure that all new employees have this information as part of their orientation or their training. My philosophy is that you can never overeducate your employees about the dangers of compromising your network and your corporate data. You got to hammer it into them until they are very aware that they should not be clicking on anything they do not know. So now that you have looked at the proactive ways that you can go about stopping these attacks and keeping your information secure, like we've said, these things are great and it'll prevent a lot of attacks, but not all of them. So there's always this human factor of people clicking on links and getting infected. So how would you even know if your credentials had been compromised or if they were for sale on the dark web? Well, that is why OnPar has now partnered with ID Agent to offer a solution called Dark Web ID. So Dark Web ID uses both human and artificial intelligence to scan the dark web for your company's information and identifies credentials that have been compromised. So it monitors over 5,000 dark websites, and it deploys these things called nodes and beacons, and they alert us when your data has been captured on any dark web platform, whether it's a criminal chat room, whether it's a private website or a peer-to-peer network. It also looks at social media platforms, and when I say social media platforms, I mean dark web social media platforms, black market websites, and internet relay chat channels. So keep in mind, Dark Web ID was actually born as a solution for the federal government. It was originally used by entities like the FBI and the National Institute of Health. So the ID Agent, the company that created this, originally did this for the federal government. And then they took on a few new clients, one of which was the NFL. And then they decided that they would allow companies like us, managed services providers, to resell this to small and medium-sized businesses like you guys. So what it does is it can identify your credentials and data because it can access criminal command and control servers from multiple geographies that national IP addresses can't access. It's got this proprietary software that will allow them to search the dark web. And now SMBs with this program can now receive the same protection and the same notifications as some of the largest private and public sector organizations in the world. So by purchasing Dark Web ID, you will be alerted with a monthly report to show the credentials that are inside your organization that have been compromised and are for sale on the dark web. This in turn allows you to take proper steps to change those passwords and similar passwords within your organization and even on your personal accounts to protect both your corporate and personal identity. So coupled with a layered approach to security, so like we said, turning on anti-phishing, turning on multi-factor authentication, patching your systems, when you combine that with Dark Web ID, we truly think that you can help your organization reduce the likelihood and impact of compromised credentials and also help you meet compliance requirements. We just are here to make sure that you're not that organization that is in the headlines for the wrong reason. So this concludes the recorded section of today's webinar. I would like to thank you for attending, And please note that if you want information on any of the products that I talked about today, be it Dark Web ID or multi-factor authentication or advanced threat protection or email encryption, you can reach out to us at sales@allempiretech.com, or you can call us at 919-926-9619 and get more information about the products that we highlighted today. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of our social media sites. We provide weekly tips and tricks. We provide cybersecurity news and other great content. And lastly, we would love it if you would register for next month's webinar. We will be doing that one on April the 19th at 1 o'clock, and it will be on why you should back up your Office 365 data. And that should be kind of obvious since you attended today's webinar. And please keep in mind that we are sending all of you reports on your company's credentials for free, so you will all get the free reports today. But let your fellow business owners know that they can get these free reports too from us. There's actually a landing page that is being put in the chat, and they can go in there and fill out a form and get a free report. This free report will show any and all emails and passwords available on the dark web so you can take appropriate action. But keep in mind these reports will be redacted for security purposes, so if you wish to receive the full encrypted report, you would need to sign up for Dark Web ID. The link to our Dark Web ID landing page should be in the comments section, and you can pass this to whomever you believe would benefit from this service. So I'm now going to take the presentation offline and stop the recording so that we can do some live demos for your privacy and allow us to discuss a special offer that we have for today's attendees.